Dale sir.
Thank you, sir.
And welcome Mohammad Kazi sir.
Thank you, Metkari sir and Dale sir. Am I audible to all?
Yes, sir.
Yes, audible.
Yeah. Good evening. This is the last session for the today's rapid revision. I am grateful and thankful to Honorable Vice Chancellor sir for giving me the opportunity to interact with all the students, which I love the most. And I am Dr. Mohammad Muqid Kazi, Associate Professor and in charge of the Department of General Pathology and Microbiology, Sihangar Dental College and Hospital, Pune. These are my topics today. The 10-12 topics have been already covered by Dr. Dhale sir, and I'll be covering almost 14 topics. And don't think that you must be thinking that it is exam point of view. I always tell my student that it is not the exam point of view, but it is the future healthcare professional point of view. So if you look at the topics, those are very important for you as a healthcare professional. So at the end of the lecture, students shall be able to recollect the theoretical knowledge about the topics discussed, and they are able to write the SAQs and LAQs correctly. They're able to develop confidence in going for final MHS examination after going through this COVID-19 lockdown period. Okay, the first and very important chapter, according to me, is the history of microbiology. There are 3 SAQs which you can expect from this chapter. And these scientists, the Robert Cox and Louis Pasteur, are very important scientists who have contributed a lot to the field of microbiology.
Yes, sir. Please share your screen.
नाही होते का सर?
नाही दिसत नाही सर.
सर तुम्ही पीपीटी सुरू करा अगोदर आणि मग शेअर करा.
ओके ओके. आता येते का सर?
नाही
अजून नाहीये.
झाले सर, तुम्ही तुमचं पीपीटी शेअरिंग बंद करा सर.
एक मिनिट सर.
हॅलो, काय नाही करायचं.
आता येते का सर?
हो बर
सर, आता दिसतंय?
नाही का?
हॅलो,
नाही
दिसत नाही अजून.
झाले सर, तुम्ही तुमचं पीपीटी बंद करा सर.
एक मिनिट सर, एक मिनिट
सर.
झाले सर, तुमचं पीपीटी. हा आता
yes okay sorry
okay
sir, start from first slide.
Okay sir, wait दिसतंय का सर?
सर आता दिसतंय सर.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Sorry for this technical issue. This is the first time I am also appearing online for the session. These are the topics which I am going to cover today about the second part of microbiology. And you can see on the screen there are 14 topics which I have chosen for the today's session. So I was talking about at the end of the lecture, student shall be able to recollect the theoretical knowledge about the topics discussed. They're able to write SAQs and LAQs correctly, and they should be able to develop confidence in going for final MHS examination. I was referring about these 2 great scientists, Robert Cox and Louis Pasteur, who have contributed a lot to the field of microbiology. What do you expect from these 2 scientists in the examination? That they ask generally short answer question, and you need to write about their contribution, whatever they have contributed to the field of microbiology. The third important SAQ which I feel that can be asked in the examination is the Koch postulates, and you all know that there are 4 postulates which you must know. First is every disease is associated with the etiological agent, and that etiological agent can be isolated in a pure form, and from the same pure form culture you can able to generate the same disease in an experimental animal, and from that experimental animal you can also again able to isolate in pure form in the culture. So these are the 4 postulates which you can generally expect from this chapter. So now moving on to the immunology part, which I feel that it is more important: immunity, antigen and antibody. What I expect from the immunity is you must know about the difference between the active and passive immunity. This is the most important SAQ which I expect from the exam point of view after going through several years of question paper. What do we expect in the difference between the active and passive immunity is that you must know there are 6 points which are very important in both the immunity. If you know first 6 points from the active immunity, you can able to write the other part of the passive immunity. So just for example, if it is in the active immunity, it is produced actively by the host immune response, while it is produced passively by the host immune response. Similarly, you can remember all the other points, so that if you remember one part, you can able to write in the second part. Okay, coming to the immunoglobulins, which is very important topic again. I have seen in the couple of years in the theory paper that they generally ask about the diagram of immunoglobulin. So this is what we expect from the students, that you need to draw the neat label diagram of immunoglobulin. This is the structure which you need to draw in the colorful way. Now, there are 4 MCQs which you can expect from this chapter. And how do you remember the different immunoglobulins from this chapter? You can see there is a one word. You can see here, gamed. So this gamed is able to remember you for all the antibodies. The last letter of the immunoglobulin is nothing but the immunoglobulin. So you can expect for IgG, the MCQ is that, which is the antibody which crosses the placenta. So your answer should be IgG. The second is IgA, which is the secretory antibodies, which is amongst the following immunoglobulins. So you can write that answer is immunoglobulin A. Third immunoglobulin, which is M antibody. This is the most important antibody which comes first and disappears first also. So this is generally detected in the recent infection. If MCQ comes on this antibody, it will be asked on the recent infection. So you need to mark it as a IgM antibody. IgE antibodies are all of you are aware that this is the most important immunoglobulin which takes part in the hypersensitivity type 1 reaction, which I'm going to cover in the next slide. So what do you expect from this chapter is that difference between the active and passive immunity, and the structure neat label diagram of the immunoglobulins. And of course, there are 4 MCQs which can be asked from this chapter. I hope you have understood what I am trying to communicate with you. Now, the most important, again, from the immunology point of view is the antigen and antibody reaction. This is also called as serological reaction. Here you can expect the LAQ, SAQ, anything from this chapter, because this is the most important chapter. Even in this, in the initial slide, I have told you that I always tell my student that it is not only for the exam point of view, but you must also be able to know as a healthcare professional in the future. So what is the question in this chapter is that define the agglutination precipitation reaction, and either discuss the agglutination reaction with the examples of that and the reaction. And you have to mention, I will show you the next in the few moments. But the agglutination reactions are very important in detection of the antibody. This can also be one of the MCQ for your question paper. So you remember that when we talk about the agglutination, the antibodies are detected very well as compared to the precipitation reaction. So these are the different applications of agglutination reaction. I have just given you the example how you go about writing the SAQs and LAQs. So these are the various application of the agglutination reaction which you need to write when asked in the examination. Now coming to the second part of this chapter, it is the precipitation reaction. Again, similarly, you have to define the precipitation reaction, and they may ask you the second part of the question as different types of precipitation reaction with the applications. So I was talking about the precipitation reactions are very important in detecting the antigen as compared to the antibody. This again can become one of the MCQ. So you remember precipitation reaction, you can remember as a PA of any leader, you can remember like that. So precipitation reactions are useful in detecting the antigens rather than the antibodies. So these are the two main application of the precipitation reaction. And you can see here the type of precipitation reactions. Remember, in the microbiology, the marking system is very clear, like a mathematics. If you go point wise in all the SAQs or LAQs, you will get you will be able to get out of out marks. I guarantee you for that. Okay, this is the most important chapter from the immunology, hypersensitivity. And in the hypersensitivity chapter, there are 4 types of hypersensitivity reaction, type 1 to type 4. And if you remember, the type 1 to type 3 are generally mediated by the immunoglobulins, while type 4 is mediated by the cell-mediated immune response, that is T cell cells, generally T lymphocytes. So when I have gone through the several question papers in the last few years, I have found out that type 1 hypersensitivity and the type 4 hypersensitivity are very important. Even again, I told you that it is exam point of view also, but you also should know as a healthcare professional, because in type 1 hypersensitivity reaction, when you are taking care of your patient, if you do not have adrenaline dose loaded, and if you are doing the person oral cavity, whatever you are doing, and the person may die because of this type of hypersensitivity reaction if you do not attempt to treat it with the adrenaline. So it is very important to know theoretical part of type 1 hypersensitivity reaction, which you might experience in your future professional life. So what do we expect from the type 1 hypersensitivity reaction? If you see here, I have highlighted the main point, like its form, what are the prerequisites, what are the different mediators which are responsible for the type 1 hypersensitivity reaction, what are the clinical features. You mentioned only what is happening in this type of reactions, and then what are the causes and what is the treatment. And similarly, if it is asked in the SAQ, generally it is asked as SAQ. This is the important aspect you need to cover up. Plus, you need to draw a diagram also. What happens in the diagram, you can see here it is written as a mechanism. What is required in the type 1 hypersensitivity reaction is the sensitization with the initial antigen, and it is presented to the antigen presenting cells and carried to the B cells, and they produces the IgE antibodies. In the previous slide, I have already mentioned that IgE are most important immunoglobulins which take part in the type 1 hypersensitivity reaction. So what happens, initial exposure, they produces few amount of antibodies, that is IgE, and they bound to the mast cell. Now what happens after a few weeks, couple of weeks, if the same antigen re-exposure, if the person get re-exposed to the same antigen, you can see here there is a degranulation of the mast cell, and it releases lots of these chemical mediators, primary or secondary, and these are responsible for all the clinical features like itching of scalp and tongue, flushing of the skin. These are the few clinical features you must mention whenever you are attempting the type 1 hypersensitivity reaction. So I feel you have got the what I want to convey from the type 1 hypersensitivity reaction. Now coming to the hypersensitivity type 4 reaction. Here also it is very important to know what is mainly important in this type of hypersensitivity reaction. Here T lymphocytes are very important as compared to the immunoglobulins. Immunoglobulins never initiate the delayed type of hypersensitivity reaction. This is also called as delayed type of hypersensitivity reaction because the time required to get the erythema, edema, and all those pathological reactions, it takes some amount of time. While in the type 1 hypersensitivity, it will give you the immediate reaction. So that is why it comes under the immediate type of hypersensitivity, and this comes under the delayed type of hypersensitivity. So what is important to be written in under type 4 hypersensitivity is that it is provoked by the intracellular parasites or haptens, and reaction is generally due to the sensitized T lymphocytes, which after contact with the specific antigen, they release the cytokines, and that causes the biological effects. It cannot be transferred passively, and it is only possible to transfer the type 4 hypersensitivity reaction by lymphocytes. So nowadays, the concept has come that leukodepleted blood is given to the recipient, so that you are not transferring the delayed type of hypersensitivity amongst the recipient. So there are two types you also should need to mention about the type 4 hypersensitivity reaction. First is the tuberculin type, and second was the contact dermatitis type ties. So tuberculin test is also being covered under the mycobacteria, so I'm not going to give details. You can see here in the diagram, whenever the person get contact with some poisonous plants, and that initiates the cell-mediated immune response, and that is responsible for forming the erythema, edema, and all that. So this is how you have to attempt the type 4 hypersensitivity reaction. Okay, this is again one of the most important chapter from the immunology, that is complement. You can expect the majority of time I have seen it has been asked as a short answer question, but you can still expect that the long answer question. When long answer question comes, you need to elaborate about these two pathways, that is classical pathway and alternative pathway. In detail, you have to write the flow chart in the what happens in the classical pathway and what happens in the alternative pathway. Now, what we expect in the short answer question when you are attempting about the complement, what is the complement? So complement is nothing but the different components of complement. It's a protein and it acts as after one after the another. So C1, after C1 it comes C4 and then C2 and C3 like that up to the C9. So this is what is the complement. And what are the different components of complement? As I said, it is from C1 to C9, and C1 is again divided into three components: C1Q, C1R and C1S. So the third point which you need to write about the SAQ of complement, the biosynthesis of these components. If you look at the table, it is clearly given which the human body part manufacture or biosynthesize which components of the complement. If you look at the C1, you start with the C1, it is generally intestinal epithelium. So how will you remember C1? You can see the first letter of intestine, I. So it is one I. So C1 is generally biosynthesized by the intestinal epithelium. Now coming to the C2 and C4, it is the table of two, something like that. So it is generally manufactured or biosynthesized in the macrophages. Now you have the spleen, which we all know it is a dead organ in the body. So you can remember certain odd complement of components which are biosynthesized in the spleen. Liver, as you all know that it is one of the vital organ in the body, and you can see here is a table of 3, 6 and 9. What is remained? 7. So it is not known who biosynthesize these the C7 complement in the body. So coming to the pathways, there are two pathways, mainly classical and alternative. There is also lectin pathway. But when I told you, when you are attempting to the long answer question, you need to elaborate the classical pathway in a flow chart. Only you need to remember when you're talking about the classical pathway, after C1, C4 comes and not the C2. After C1, C4 comes and not the C2. And after C1, C4, C2 will come, and then C3, C4, C5, C6, C7, 8 and 9. This is the flow. What you have to remember in the flow chart, after C1, C4 will come and not the C2. 1, 2, 3, it's not like that. 1, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Second important difference when you're writing about the classical pathway, whenever one component acts as an enzyme to the next complement of the complement, it cleaves into two components. One is the smaller, which is denoted by B letter, and one is the bigger, which is denoted by A letter. So whenever we say that A letter, it is released into the bloodstream, while B stands for binding, so it will bind to the cascade. Only difference you need to remember in the flow is that except C2A is going to bind and C2B is going to release. Otherwise, A is going to release and B is going to bind. So the next point, what you need to write about the deficiency in these components of complement. For example, what happens if C3 is not there? If a person is lacking C3, it means that the person is very vulnerable to the pyogenic infections. And how do you quantify these individual complements of complement? So it is the ELISA, which is generally used to quantify the components of complement. So this is all about the complement. Either you can expect the SAQ, mostly SAQ, but you can also expect the LAQ. Now, the few bacteria have already been covered by Dhale sir. So I'm covering the one which are very important. As I told you, it is must know, and must know not only exam point of view, it is also a public health point of view. I don't know how many of you are aware. My student might be knowing about this. Mycobacteria can cause a gingival tuberculosis. So this gingival tuberculosis can be taken it as a periodontitis. So you must know about the mycobacteria, not only the exam point of view, but also a public health point of view. So what do you expect from the mycobacteriology or mycobacteria? A long answer question on Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So what do they ask in the long answer question? They ask generally about the morphology, cultural characteristics, pathogenesis of the Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and discuss in detail the laboratory diagnosis of tuberculosis. So as probably you have heard about, Dr. Dhale sir was talking about the morphology point. There are only 5 to 6 points which you need to remember when you are attempting any microorganisms from the syllabus. What are those 5 points? You have, if you go back, you see the Gram's nature, whether it is gram positive or gram negative. Second, its size. How do you remember the size? Even there are hundreds of bacteria. How do you remember the size? I have given one clue to my students. I'm giving to entire students now. If you see if the coca is there, it is only width. When you have a bacilli, it is width and length. So you just write if it is cocci 0.2 to 0.4 micron. Micron is the measure of unit. And if you write, if you have the bacilli, that means rod shape, you write 0.2 to 0.4 into 2 to 4 micron. So this is how you write about the size. The third point about the motility, you have to make a list of the organisms which are motile and which are non-motile. And then the fourth point is about the acid fastness. Except Mycobacteria, all other organisms are non-acid fast. So the fourth point is done. What is the fifth point? Fifth point about the spore bearing. Which organisms are spore bearing? I mean spore forming and non-spore forming. So if you go by the list, only Clostridia and Bacillus are spore bearing. Others are not the spore bearing. So you have 3 points, 4 points, which you can straight away write from any organism. You don't need to remember much about the morphology. If you have carefully listened to Dallas sir, he has given one beautiful example. How do you go about the cultural class? Again, here also there are 4 points. One is the requirement of oxygen. What organism, whether it is strictly aerobic, whether it is aerobic to facultative anaerobe, or it is completely anaerobic organism. You know, there are only few organisms which are there as anaerobes, like Clostridia. These are the strictly anaerobes. But the rest of the organism, again, some non-sporing anaerobes are there, which are concerned with the dentistry, that is Porphyromonas, Bacteroides. They are strict or the facultative anaerobes. So you can also see the list. You can write straight away, this organism is aerobic to facultative anaerobes. What is the second point in the cultural characteristics you need to remember? The cultivation on the spatial media. Now here in the Mycobacteria, what do you use? It is the Lowenstein-Jensen medium. And so you have to talk about the Lowenstein-Jensen media and how the colony morphology occurs on that. And the third point is the incubation. If you look at the incubation, majority of the organisms grow better at 37 degrees Celsius, which is our body temperature, plus or minus 2. If you write 37 degrees Celsius, pH neutral, 6.2 to 7.2 range, that is fine for that. So these are the few points which you need to remember when you are attempting the cultural characteristics. Now I'm talking about the laboratory diagnosis. Again, here also, if you write 4 points, what is the requirement of laboratory diagnosis of any disease? Forget about the tuberculosis, any disease. What you require is specimen collection. So the first point is specimen collection. Based upon what disease has been asked, you can right now here in tuberculosis, what you will collect? Early morning sputum sample in a wide mouth sterile container. Next point is microscopy. What microscopy will do? Here you cannot do the gram stain because it is a poorly stained gram stain. So what is important here is the ZN stain, Zeal-Neelsen stain. So they are acid fast bacilli. Third point is cultivation. How do you cultivate this bacteria? We generally cultivate this bacteria with the help of Lowenstein-Jensen medium, and write down again the few points above from the cultural characteristics. So duplication is there here in the laboratory diagnosis. And fourth point is identification and the antibiotic sensitivity. So any disease, if it is there in the LAQ or SAQ, you must start with the specimen collection, then with the microscopy. Third one is the cultivation, and the last one is the identification and antibiotic sensitivity pattern. So this is how you need to go about when you are talking about the laboratory diagnosis of any disease. Here I am talking about the tuberculosis. You can expect 2 more SAQ from this chapter, atypical Mycobacteria. I think you also know that it is also called as MOTT. What does it mean? It means that Mycobacteria other than tuberculosis. So this can, don't get confused. If it is atypical Mycobacteria, still it is MOTT. If it is MOTT, still it is atypical Mycobacteria. There are 4 organisms here. The classification here, you can remember photochromogens, cotochromogens, non-chromogens, rapid growth. Here also you can remember the examples of each one. I'll give you the clue of that. Photochromogens example is Mycobacterium kansasi. All of you are aware that Kansas City is there. Kansas City mein light lag gaya. So you just remember that photochromogens kansasi. Mycobacterium is common genus for everyone. So you don't have to remember Mycobacterium. The scotochromogens is Scrofulaceum. Sco from the first letter of this and Scrofulaceum from the species. So Mycobacterium Scrofulaceum is an example of scotochromogens. Non-photochromogens, whenever we see, you just see your stomach, we generally get the ulcers. So the non-photochromogens, the example is Mycobacterium ulcerans. Now this is the young generation. I always tell my students also, just chill. This is something which is a very, dear words in the this generation. So just chill. So how do you remember the example of rapid growers? Mycobacterium chiloni. Chiloni, chill. So this is how I have told my students. You can also take the advantage of remembering the different examples amongst these atypical Mycobacteria. Of course, Montauk's test, which can also be asked in the examination. What do you know about the Montauk's test? You just have to write the aim of the Montauk's test, procedure of the Montauk's test. How do you interpret the Montauk's test? How do you interpret the Montauk's test? It is based upon the measurement of the diameter of erythema and erythema generally. If it is more than 9 millimeter in diameter, the person is truly positive. If it is 4 to 9, then person is intermediate. If it is less than 5 or 4, it is the non-tuberculin patient. Now coming to the one of the most important chapter, that is the Corynebacteria. If you have gone through the several question paper of the MUHS, you have seen lot of time the Corynebacteria has been asked as a LAQ. So what do you expect from the LAQ? It is again same as of morphology, cultural characteristics, and the laboratory diagnosis of diphtheria. As I have told you about the important aspect about them, how do you remember about the morphology and cultural characters. Here you can remember one of the MCQ from the Corynebacteria is the Chinese letter appearance. This is the organism which gives you the Chinese letter appearance in the Gram-Stein morphology. So this is one of the MCQ from this chapter. Now coming to the LX gel precipitation, this is again the SAQ which is mostly asked in the examination. You need to diagram what is the LX gel precipitation. What is the usefulness of this LX gel precipitation? And you need to draw a neat label diagram again. If you have here seen, this is generally done to know the the toxicity of the isolated from the patient sample. Generally it is toxigenic or non-toxigenic. When you get the toxigenic, you will get the line of precipitate. You can see here, if it is a line of precipitate, you will get arc. It means that it is the positive. That means it is the toxigenic strains. If you do not get any line like arc, it is referred as a non-toxigenic strain. So you remember this, the LAQ is also very important, and SAQ, amongst the SAQ from this chapter is the LX gel precipitation reaction. And one of the MCQ is based upon the morphological characteristics, that is Chinese letter appearance. You may get a question, which is amongst the following organism is the Chinese letter appearance. So you can just refer that it is the Corynebacterium diphtheria. Now coming to the another most important chapters, Salmonella and Vibrio. I have clubbed these two organisms together, and you can expect the long answer question on the Salmonella as well as the Vibrio cholera. I have just mentioned here about the Salmonella, but you can expect the disease laboratory diagnosis. If it is Salmonella, it is typhoid, and if it is Vibrio, it is the cholera. So what do you remember again in the morphology? Those 4-5 points. Biochemical reaction, you must know about these organisms. And then again, I have told you, even if you write those 4 points and just mention one thing from each point, that is, for example, the specimen collection, then the microscopy, then third one is the cultivation, and fourth one is the identification and the antibiotic sensitivity. So similarly, you can attempt the typhoid as well as the cholera laboratory diagnosis. I expect still one of the two important SAQs from these two chapters. Salmonella, it is Vidal test, and the classification of Vibrio, which I have given one of the example of SAQ, how you go about it. You just have to mention the flow chart. Vibrio group A and group B divided into basis upon the biochemical similarities and the H antigen. And then if you go further on the subtyping on the serotypes, and then it is divided into various biotypes, that is O1 and non-O1. Then it is a classical and LTAR in the O1, and classical and LTAR again are divided into 3: Ogawa, Inaba, and Hikojima. So even if you draw this flow chart, you will get 3 out of 3 marks. So remember, when you are attempting the classification of Vibrio, you need to draw this flow chart. You will get 100% marks. Okay. This is a very important chapter from bacteriology, Treponema. If you go other two spirochetes, Borrelia and Leptospirosis. Leptospirosis can also be one of the SAQ which can be asked in the examination. But what I've seen in the last couple of years, LAQ is asked on the Treponema, that is morphology, pathogenesis, and laboratory diagnosis of syphilis. And again, in the laboratory diagnosis of syphilis, you can expect one of the separate SAQ as a serological test for syphilis. Here again, you need to enumerate what are the treponemal tests and what are the non-treponemal tests. So this is again as per the analysis of several years of questions. This is again one of the most important chapter from the bacteriology, that is Treponema pallidum. which causes syphilis. So you can prepare as a LAQ, or if you prepare LAQ, automatically you can prepare the SAQ also. We have done with the bacteriology. The cocci have already been covered by Dhale sir, and even the Clostridia he has covered. Now, what I feel is most important chapter, that is mycology. Mycology, I have never seen the LAQ, but yes, there are 6 to 7 SAQs from this chapter. I have taken few examples of 2 examples from this chapter so that you will be able to prepare nicely. One of the I think in the last year only they have asked for a referred batch discuss the morphological classification of fungi. You can see here in the diagram, you have to write the morphological classification: yeast-like fungi, filamentous, that is dimorphic fungi, and then you can draw the diagrams for each. And of course, you need to mention the examples for each of them. Yeast is Cryptococcus neoformans, yeast-like is Candida albicans, filamentous fungi is Aspergillus, and dimorphic fungi are the histoplasmasis and all those. Okay, so you have to remember the dimorphic fungi also. The other important short answer questions which you can expect from the mycology is that candidiasis, dermatophytes, these 2 are very important, and of course aspergillosis and rhinosporidiasis. If you prepare the rhinosporidiasis in microbiology, you can use this knowledge even in the pathology. Even in pathology, you can expect the short answer question on the rhinosporidiasis. Even if you've done written part from the pathology, you will still get few marks, but definitely don't do that mistake. In microbiology, what we expect is the morphological characteristic of that organism. How do you cultivate of that organism? What are the different diseases they cause? What are the clinical features they have? And then laboratory diagnostics. In laboratory diagnostics, as I said, specimen collection, microscopy, cultivation, and then identification. This is how you have to attempt these questions. And then of course, I still feel that one of the important SAQ from this chapter, histoplasmosis. I have taken one of the example as a candidiasis. This is the most important. Again, why I have taken the candidiasis, I'll tell you. You are going to become a future health, dental health professionals, where you can get able to come across the candidiasis, oral candidiasis in your OPDs. So you must know at least basic knowledge about the candidiasis, so that you can able to diagnose clinically at least. And if you want to confirm that, at least you can send a sample and get confirmed on the microbiology lab. Don't need it, but still, if you are a good professional, you can able to diagnose that and tell your patient, yes, this is the candidiasis. So it will be helpful for all of you. So how do you go about writing the short answer question on the candidiasis? You have seen here on the left, I have narrated a few points or few headings under which you need to cover up the candidiasis. So morphology in microbiology is too important. You cannot neglect morphology and directly go to the clinical features or pathology. You have to always remember that you need to write about the morphology. It is the gram-positive oval structure measuring of 5 to 6 micron as a size of the RBCs. Then how do you cultivate the candidiasis? Sabarod, dextrozagar. Again, in the Sabarod, dextrozagar, there are 2 ways by which you can cultivate. One is at a room temperature. Second one is at the 37 degrees Celsius. You do not miss out. The idea of incubating at room temperature and the 37 degrees Celsius, that you are giving chance to grow that fungus. And then diseases they cause or the clinical features mainly, or pathogenesis here we expect. And then of course laboratory diagnosis, as I told you, specimen collection, microscopy, cultivation, and identification. Even you can expect one of the SAQ which I haven't mentioned in the previous slide, that is the germ tube test. Germ tube test, what is the aim? It is to differentiate between the Candida albicans and the non-albicans. And how do you perform the germ tube test is very important. And how do you interpret the germ test is very important. If you look at this figure, the cell wall has been extended into a pseudohyphae. This is a true pseudohyphae which is formed by the Candida albicans and not other Candida species. And of course, you need to write about the treatment. There are few antifungals which you need to remember, and they are commonly used for all all fungal infections. So this is how you should go about the short answer question about the candidiasis. Okay, this was about the mycology. Now the most important, and why I say is most important, as we all are suffering from one of the deadliest virus in the world, that is COVID-19 disease, which is caused by SARS-CoV type 2. Okay, so don't forget to do 2 SAQs from the very first chapter, that is general properties of viruses. What are those 2 SAQs? One is the cultivation of viruses, and second was the replication of viruses. Even in the cultivation of viruses, there was one time I have seen they have asked only SAQ on the tissue culture. So there are total three SAQs from this chapter. So never neglect this chapter. Again, not because exam point of view, but you must know. Now we have to know about the viruses. You never know which virus is going to come in the future also, like COVID-19 infective agents, that is SARS-CoV-2. Okay, so you should know these two SAQs plus separately tissue culture as a separate SAQ. So what do you know about, what do you write about the cultivation of viruses? There are three methods. I haven't given the details of these methods. You need to write the details of these methods when you are attempting the short answer question. Various animals which we use generally, the suckling mice is the most commonest animal which we use. Even the guinea pigs, rabbits, humans were used initially. Then they went on to the monkeys and then guinea pigs, and then the latest is the suckling mice. And if you look at in the embryonated egg, there are, I'm sorry for this picture, but you can see from the Anand Narayan or any other book, there are four again different methods by which you can cultivate the various viruses in the embryonated egg. And again in the tissue cultures, there are different types of cultivation, like explant culture, tissue culture, cell culture. Again in cell culture, we have primary cell lines, secondary cell lines, and then continuous cell lines. This is how you need to elaborate. I have just given you the example. You need to elaborate each point in detail when you are attending the SAQ. Now coming to the replication of virus, there are 6 steps which you need to know. We don't expect, of course, the diagram of replication viruses, but what happens in the first step, what happens in the second step? You need to write the attachment, then penetration, then biosynthesis, assembly, and then release. So what happens in the attachment? Viruses have the spatial receptors on their surfaces. They have a very specificity with the host cell, and they bind together with the specificity. And after that, they penetrate the infectious material, that is nucleic material, in the cytoplasm of the host cells. There, the host cell DNA, either it get integrated with the host DNA and remain quiet for a long time. That is why you have seen in the various viruses, the latency is very quite high. For example, in the HIV, almost 3 months to 6 months. But if you look at this pandemic virus, it is almost 14 days, 3-4 days to 14 days. It depends upon how much time they require to replicate their generation, how much importance they give for having their own progeny, and then coming out of that host cell and infecting again the new cell. So this is how you go about the replication of the viruses. Now this is again, which is very important. Again, I have told you, this is one of the most deadliest virus, which requires very little amount of infecting dose to get in the dentistry. Dentists are the second vulnerable population amongst getting the hepatitis infection, because you are going to get involved in the microsurgeries, and you will never know who is positive for hepatitis and who is positive for HIV. Forget about the HIV for time being, but hepatitis is very highly infectious and it can get transmitted through needle stick injuries. So that is why you need to know about the hepatitis virus, which are the hepatitis virus which cause infective hepatitis, and which are the hepatitis which cause the waterborne hepatitis. Okay, so A and E are generally the waterborne, and then rest of them are the serum hepatitis, infective hepatitis and the serum hepatitis. So what do you expect from this laboratory diagnosis of hepatitis? And the second most important, which couple of times it has been asked in the MHS examination, is the draw neat, well-labeled diagram of hepatitis virus. So you just have to draw a circle, and then you have to mention the different parts of the hepatitis virus. Very important. If you have only drawn the 2 circles and they have done something in the middle, like a spiral structure, you won't get complete marks. If examiner is little bit, okay, it's fine, 0.5 marks you will get. But if you want to score 3 out of 3, you must draw. Of course, you write the measurement. If you don't write measurement, it's fine, but you need to know which part is the surface antigen, which part of virus is the core antigen, where is the DNA polymerase, where is the envelope antigen. You should know, and you should label it very properly. Okay, this is HIV, human immunodeficiency virus. Most important, again, not only exam point of view, as a healthcare worker, you must know about the human immunodeficiency virus in and out. What do you expect from the HIV and opportunistic infections in AIDS? You expect 3 major short answer questions. First one is very important, that is laboratory diagnosis of HIV. If you go in the Anant Narayan book, textbook, you will find lots of tests which have been prescribed for the laboratory diagnosis of HIV. You need to mention each and every test and you will get out of out marks. Okay, and then of course, like hepatitis, they can also ask you the diagram of human immunodeficiency virus. Again, I have told you, you need to know, you need to label it, which is GP120, where is GP41, where is the P24, which is the RNA, which is the RNA dependent DNA polymerase enzyme, where is the reverse transcript, everything you must label it, then only you will get 3 out of 3 marks. So, and the third one, which is very important according to me, is the opportunistic infection rates. You can see here in the table, do not write haphazardly, one from the bacteria, one from the immediately fungal, then again bacteria, then again from the virus. Don't do that. How do you attempt this opportunistic infection rates? Right, either fungal infections or protozoal infections. List out which of the organisms which comes under the protozoal or which comes under the fungal infections. They similarly bacterial infections and then viral infections. Even if you write all these 2 plus 5, 7 plus 3, 10, and then 14 names of the different viruses, fungi and bacteria and parasites, you will get 3 out of 3 marks. Mind it, I give you the guarantee, if you write these less, you will definitely get the 3 out of 3 marks. So these are the 3 short answer questions which I expect, and you must know. Again, exam point of view is very essential for all of us. I mean, you all. But of course, when you're going as a dental profession, you must know what are the different tests which are need to be performed for the diagnosis of HIV viruses. Okay. This is what is the highlight of my today's topic. Why I'm saying highlight? As we all know that we are suffering from the deadliest disease, that is the COVID-19 disease, and you know that it's highly transmissible, and you never know from where you are going to get infected. So that is why the government of India and everywhere it is implemented as a lockdown period. Why we need to lock down ourselves? Because we are not aware who is positive, even if it is asymptomatic, can transmit the infection. So what is more important when you have such kind of diseases or pandemics? You need to know, must know infection control practices. What do you mean by infection control practices? These are the laid down guidelines by CDC, that is Center for Disease Control, and World Health Organization, where they have given some important practices which you need to implement. Like for example, immunization. Of course, now of COVID-19, you don't have immunization. So immunization is useful for prevention. Which disease? Hepatitis. Still, HIV also has not got immunization, but H1N1, yes, it was there. So immunization of healthcare worker is very important. Most important, cost effective, the hand hygiene. Nowadays, you might have seen, wash your hands. How are you going to wash your hands? There is a step which is described by World Health Organization. There are 7 steps. You must know which are those 7 steps. If I want you to demonstrate me, I'll demonstrate. You have to rub your palm to palm very vigorously, so that your crevices, whenever you're working with the patient, you will never know you have those secretions which are stick to your hands. So you need to vigorously rub your palm to palm. And this entire 7-step procedure requires 20 seconds. Mind it, 20 seconds. And soap and water is the best cost effective to get rid of these diseases. Any disease, forget about the COVID-19, any disease. So what you need to do, you have to rub palm to palm, then your back of the palm, go in between the fingers, it is very essential, and then interlacing. We never cover this part of your hands, okay? So it is interlacing. Then if you look at this interlocking, it is called as interlocking. If you try to pull out, it never comes. So it is interlocking. What is the importance of interlocking? It is important because you never cover the nail beds, and nail beds are the most important part of your hand, okay? Then this is the interlocking both way. Then beneath the nails, we never cover up. So what you do, you just put it on the palm of other hand. Similarly, left hand on the right hand. So this is how you are covering the beneath the nail. And then finally, rotation of thumb. If you have seen all the hostelites, I always tell my students, they go to the wash basin, they wet their hands, and they're ready for lunch, right? Now you cannot take the chances like this. You need to perform the 7 steps hand hygiene practices which is being described by World Health Organization, keeping something in their mind. So you're covering the nail beds, you're covering beneath the nail, you're covering the crevices, you're covering the other part, the side part of your fingers, and then you're also covering the thumb, and finally the rotation of the wrist. This is how you have to perform the hand hygiene. And this is the list on your right, on your screen. You can see immunization, hand hygiene, standard precaution. Why it is called a standard precaution? It is called a standard precaution because now you never know in the, I'm not talking about the COVID-19, but HIV is a pandemic also. So if you look at me, you cannot say that I'm HIV positive or hepatitis B positive. How will you come to know just by looking at the patient? No, you cannot. So what do you do then? Any patient who is going to come to your OPD for his or her oral care, you must consider in your mind, don't tell this to the patient. You must consider in your mind that he or she might be positive for hepatitis or HIV. So I need to wear personal protective equipment. Okay. So in the standard precautions, personal protective equipment is very important. Personal hygiene is very important. Nowadays, if you see in the BDS course, 80% are female students, and they like to grow their nails, have art on their nails, leave their hairs long. Don't do that. You have chosen a career, healthcare. So you need to be control your emotions, control your beautifications to not to get infected from the various infections during patient care. Very important, biomedical waste management. I'm coming to in the next slide about this, so I'm not covering here. Spillage management, immediately you need to take care of the spillage management with the 1% hypochlorite solution. Again, you need to, where you need to dispose of, I'll tell you in the next slide. Needle stick injury, as I told you, hepatitis and HIV are most common infections which get infected. The second most vulnerable population in the healthcare after nursing staff is the dentistry. Don't get afraid. I'm not trying to make you afraid about it, but knowledge is always good. Awareness is always good. So I'm just making you all aware of it. So whenever you get the needle stick injury, you need to go the PEP prophylaxis. What is the PEP prophylaxis? It is the post-exposure prophylaxis. You must inform to the immediate senior that I have got this type of injuries. We need to perform the HIV hepatitis for myself and even for the patient. You need to convince your patient also. He may not agree for that, but you need, if he doesn't agree, you cannot force also. But then try to help him by saying that if you test yourself, even I'm going to get come to know whether it is there. Okay. So it is very important for PEP prophylaxis. Isolation prophylaxis. Now you have heard isolation very commonly in the field of COVID-19. Isolation is very important because you cannot take chances to spread this infection. Already sterilization disinfection protocols have been narrated by Dhale sir, so I'm not going to, but this is one of the important practices you must know and you should know about this. Okay. Now coming to the most important, that is biomedical waste management. You can expect this SAQ in the examination looking at the COVID-19 also. I don't know, but I'm just guessing. My sixth sense says that it might come. So SAQ, biomedical waste management, they may ask you the definition of the biomedical waste management. So you need to know the definition of the biomedical waste management. And then what is the plan? These are the 5 steps you can implement when you are talking about the waste management plan. And then the color coding. This is very important. What do you do with the yellow bag? You discard all the biodegradable waste, such as the cotton, gauze, human body, anatomical body part, or the culture media, or the specimens, everything yellow. What do they do with that? They incinerate. And then in red, generally the plastic, infectious plastic, for example, blood bag, Euro bag, all this will go into the red bag. And then blue, non-infectious plastic waste, such as saline bottle, which is never infectious at all. And then in the black, it is general waste, which is non-infectious. And there should be a puncture-proof container which contains 1% hypochlorite solution for the sharps, metal sharps like needles or these scalpels. Okay, this is how you will be attempting the biomedical waste management. I think I have done with my presentation. I have taken the references from a textbook of Anant Narayan Panikar, and images I have taken from the Google. I would like to take the opportunity to acknowledge Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, Jayan Palaskar Sir, who is the brainchild of this rapid revision, who is also a Dean of Faculty, who is a head of the department in our college. Matkari Sir is a very nice coordinator I have ever seen. He has been instrumental for all of us to get ready for the lectures. Even today also, 5 minutes ago, before he asked me my entire name, because my name is little bit difficult to pronounce. And I would like to thank my principal, Dr. Samir Patil. He is very instrumental, very supportive, always supports all of us, all faculties. My co-faculties, Dr. Panchwadkar sir was my ex-faculty in my college. And then Rupali Madam